part 2 of the LS KE build. I've made some progress. What have I done? I have made some actual size finished product crossmember spaces. 30mm I ended up with, which is bigger than I've ran before. The biggest I've seen or put in a car is 25s. So I'll check some geometry stuff when I get to suspension and that, which will probably be next video. But yeah, so engine mounts are tacked in. Pretty much what I've done here is, as soon as I find it, I mean, it's close. Depends how the car's sitting on the hoist, I think. Anyway, so that's pretty close to zero. Like I said, when I had the hoist down a bit before, it was at zero. So once again, very, very close to zero. It's not really going to matter in this instance. I've centered the crank between the chassis rails. Now, there's not really many places you can measure off on cars like steel panels and stuff, but chassis rails may or may not be central depending on what car you're working with, but in this case, they're pretty close. So I've got these 40mm spacers in there. Now they're just like a poly bush that I machined up because I had some sitting here, but I'm going to go to a hard plastic bush, I think. Gearbox, I'll touch on that in a bit, but yeah, I'm basically going to run a bush on the gearbox. So gearbox, rubber mounted engine will be solid mounted, but in saying that, it's still got some give in it. I'll probably run over a little bit more, but it's obviously only tacked in, right? So these two plates are like sitting level with each other, left to right. These engine mounts now, obviously this is an LS1 block and it's just to dummy everything up, but mounts are the same. I've just flipped left to right. So basically with the mounts that I had before, with the one on the other side, the mount sort of ended up the front here, but now they're flipped to sit further back. So they line up basically as a 6-litre would in a VE Commodore sort of thing, because yeah, a VE is like a rear sump and this is a VY sump off of a earlier Commodore. So yeah, got all that tacked in. I'm going to pull it out and weld it up in a minute probably. I need to sandblast the crossmember because it is yeah, a little bit rusty, and that's the only way I'm going to actually get it all off. So yeah, engine in, down as low as I can possibly get it. So the next problem that we run into here is going to be the sump sitting very low. So obviously this sump now is still higher than the crossmember, right? So that was the aim of the game for me. But this here is sitting 30mm lower than what it would if I didn't put those crossmember spacers in. This was what I was talking about last video, where like, I don't like to run crossmember spacers, but in this instance, you pretty much got to. And as long as the suspension is set up to suit the crossmember spacers, there's no issue with it, essentially. But yeah, so I'm going to make a bash bar or a brace or something that sits down there lower than the sump. So when driving it, basically, worst case, if you hit something, if you go off track, hit a ripple strip, whatever, that brace or bar or bracket or whatever I'm going to make to fit there, like I said, probably a bash plate of some description, will take the brunt of it. Next thing here, obviously this is mounted pretty low in the car, right? Alternator is going to be possibly an issue here for clearance, but I'm actually going to space down the cast rod brackets. So these two braces here, right? Probably only 10mm, I think. I'll just make up some like weld on spaces to go on up underneath those bolts there. Now, this section across the front here, the thing when you're putting an LS in into a Corolla like this, I don't think I touched on it last episode, is radiator placement. So if you're not using the rear sump and like mid-mounting the engine, your option is obviously front sump, and this is, like I said, VY sump, which means you're pretty limited to where you can actually mount the engine. It is as far back as possible. There is an air gap, plus a couple mil in there sort of thing. It's very, very tight. Obviously, you can notch the crossmember, but in this case, I've actually moved that rack forward already 30mm. So the crossmember starts to get pretty narrow in there. So what I'm getting at here is if you are putting a radiator, like a normal front radiator in this, like I am, you can imagine this is obviously where a radiator is going to sit in here, very close to the balancer there. But what I'm planning on doing is I'm going to notch all this out. So I'm going to cut all of this front chassis rail out, and I'm going to custom make a piece that welds back in here. Essentially, like I said, this is going to drop at least 10 mil. So I'm going to gain 10 mil of clearance down here, and the radiator will sit all the way down here basically, and I'll just have a bracket that goes down in underneath sort of thing, probably out of some tube or RHS, and then it will essentially sit under the radiator. So the radiator will mount into that. I'll probably dive into that next video. Now, you can't really come forwards too far with this because the panel that goes across here on the flat fronts sits really close to that chassis rail, I guess. So yeah, that's why I'm going to go down, and like I said, if anything, that's just going to create a little bit more of a bump stop more than anything, that I can mount a bash plate off of for that sump. So yeah, that's going to be pretty straightforward. I haven't worked out what radiator I'm going to use yet. Did some Googling. Options are very slim. Like my normal go-to for this stuff is S13, because you can get it in both CA or SR configurations, so like across or directly above and below sort of each other for the inlet and outlet. In this instance, like I said, I was trying to get the biggest radiator in here that I could. Now JZX100 is very, very close, so that's another reason why I'm thinking I'm going to drop those caster rod brackets a smidge, because if I can get 10 mil extra at the bottom, that's going to help me at the top for bonnet clearance, and I want to try and get a nice neat radiator support back in. Now this rad support's probably not staying. I think I'm going to try and run as much factory metal on this as possible, because realistically factory metal is very light. It's obviously engineered pretty well, and unless it's bent and stuff, the reason why I cut my Corolla up is because it's been bent and crashed and stuff many, many times. But this is very straight. Like my chassis rails have got kinks and stuff in them here. But yeah, this thing, very, very straight. So I'm going to try and utilize as much factory metal as I can on this. I do have a like flat front radiator support that I'm probably use for the lights and stuff if I go that direction. But yeah, like I said, once I work out what radiator I'm going to use, I'll dive into that a little bit more. I think with this, I'm going to put some good like spower fans on it. Like my go-to is obviously Falcon fans of some description. There's a few different models and stuff. You can go single or twin thermos for them, and they move a lot of air, but the spower fans are very thin, and I'm not going to have much room between. Like you can imagine, that's pretty much where the radiator is going to sit, so I'm not going to have much room behind that. So anyway, we'll tuck all that in. Enough talking. I'm actually going to go do some work on my Corolla, so let's skip to that. exciting news. A little over 2.5 weeks and I'm back at Summernats with the Corolla doing drifting demos, so super excited. But that means time to get stuck into cleaning this up because, I mean, it's a drift car, very, very well used. She's seen some things, so we are flat out cleaning it up at the moment. Sick of sanding stuff, but many more hours of that to go. I could not do this without help from a couple of people. First, Nick for the lend of the shed, Travis for helping with some bodywork, because let's face it, I'm not the best at bodywork. I can do it, but as well as Evan, because he's going to give us a hand putting some colour down on it. So now it's just a clean up, but you'll see there's a few things different. If you know the car, no stripes. What's going on there? They coming back? Don't know, but yeah, these rear quarters, they well, I can guarantee you they won't last the weekend. Fresh boot, very hard to find, but yep, you know I'm gonna wreck that because I don't know if I've been to an event or a Summernats and not wrecked a little bit of something. Not my fault, admittedly, right? Because, you know, most cars, they have like a bumper or a bash bar. This thing doesn't, it's just got a boot. So this is my bash bar. I don't know, there's no like nice neat way of putting a bash bar or a bumper on it that I like. So it's just, let's replace some tailgates whenever I wreck it, which is every time I drive it basically. So anyway, if you want to come for a ride, you can. So obviously Summernats is the 2nd till the 5th, I think it is, 5th, something like that, of January. So like I said, a little over 2 weeks away. We leave to head over there New Year's Eve actually. So yeah, pretty close to a couple of weeks. But yeah, like I said, you can come for a ride. If you head to the Drift Cadet website, I'll put a QR code here, or maybe a link below, so check them out. Basically, if you hit that, it'll take you to session times and everything for the weekend. Then you pick your session. They will sell out. Now, every year, it seems to get busier and busier and busier for the drifting. So last year, we lost count of how many rides we did, but a lot of rides, they will sell out. Every time they sell out. Arvo sessions, the busiest. Morning sessions, sometimes there's some availability on the day and stuff, but yeah, I wouldn't bank on it basically. Like I said, it's been getting busier and busier every year. So anyway, so if you want to come for a ride in the Corolla, you can. Hit the link, check that out. But for now, I've got a heap more sanding to do, and I got another Corolla to work on as well, so let's get back to it. All right, this is what I've come up with, okay? So this was actually just an old bit of roll cage tube I had lying around, and it had just the right bend in it, so that we're level on the bottom. Thereabouts. Yep, see, spot on. And I've just welded these plates, so obviously everything's just tacked together at the moment, but they're two plates, they're bolted together essentially with, I don't know, about 100mm plate, 2 bolts, and then 2 holes drilled and tapped in the top plate. Top plate there is welded to the floor. Essentially like this style, like the standard mounts, I would say. Now the reason I've done it like that is the channels inside the floor pan up the top, basically where the seat mounts bolt to, there's that channel that goes all the way across the floor. So this is actually the strongest part of the floor, and that's why I've picked that spot. I've also decided to go with that rather than between the chassis rails because obviously we need to fit some exhaust in here. So there's going to be twin 3-inch exhaust coming through here with an X pipe back here somewhere. So I've got to think ahead and make sure I can fit all of that in pretty much. Yeah, obviously you got to, as you're going through all these things, if you're building it yourself, you got to just imagine how everything's going to work. Like I said, tail shaft clearance is the first one. I do want to change that yoke to another style of yoke. But if I don't, then I've made sure that there's enough clearance for now. The other thing was, like I said last video, whether I'm deciding to cut the whole trans tunnel out. Now these Corollas, if you want to run them low, you've got to cut some of the trans tunnel out, no matter what. So if you've got a big diff in the car, pretty much from sort of here back somewhere, there's a ridge in the floor, probably here back, all that has to be cut out up to like here. A new piece of steel bent up and welded in. Otherwise you can't get them low enough without the diff rubbing on the floor, basically, or without the back of the tail shaft rubbing on the floor. So I'm going to have to do that regardless, but whether I have to do the front of it, I'm not sure yet. We'll see as we go. Yeah, maybe as, like I said, I'll probably, once I've got a tail shaft here, or at least work out exactly what yoke I'm gonna run on that end of it, then I can go from there. But for now, yeah, like I said, standard mount that goes to the gearbox, like the TR6060. Now this here, this old bush, right? It's getting a new bush eventually, don't worry. This is actually an upper trailing arm from a Corolla that I've just cut off, so easy to get bushes for. So I've cleaned it up and just stitched it on to the standard mount, basically. Now I will fully weld that, obviously, once I finalize all of this. But these are the other pieces that I've come up with. Pretty much, I had some offcuts lying around that were very, very close to fitting. These were some old, I think I was using them as like a dummy wing mount on an old wagon or something that I had. I can't remember, but anyway, they were sitting here, not getting used for anything in particular. Pretty close there. Just notched a little bit out. Obviously, once I've welded this on, I'm definitely going to brace it all up and everything. There's another one here somewhere, just there. And that will be the same on this side, so still hot. All right, like that. Now, I sat here on this chair for about an hour looking at this, trying to work out the best, neatest possible way to do it, the most easiest to access, the easiest to, like I said, get the gearbox in and out afterwards. And this is pretty much what I come up with. So the trailing arm thing, like I said, I wanted something easy to get because it's Corolla, you know, keep Corolla parts on Corollas. And I was concerned that one wouldn't be enough to mount the gearbox. But in saying that, I had a look at Tough Mounts kits, and they're like generic TR6060 or T56 mounts that you can buy. They've just got the single bush on them basically. So yeah, if they've worked it out that it only needs one, then it only is getting one. So like I said, I looked at mounting two on there, or yeah. Anyway, long story short, it's getting one, and it's going to end up like that. Nice little brace welded across the bottom, tucked up pretty high. Will turn out pretty neat, I reckon. Yep, stoked on it. Now, one more thing. I'm approaching 4,000 subscribers, so I think I'm 70 short of 4,000. So my goal for this year, for 2024, was to make it to 4,000 subscribers. So if you're watching this and you haven't yet subscribed and you want to stay up to date, please help me out and hit the subscribe button. It would be greatly appreciated. Like I said, I want to get to that 4,000 this year so I can keep growing this channel above and beyond, so I can move on to my next goals, which are probably building more cool cars at this stage, or more silly cars. Hectic few weeks ahead. So like I said, Summernats prep, building 2 cars. Lucky we're not taking 2 cars to Summernats this year, but yeah, time is not my friend lately, but we'll get there. We'll make it happen. I'll keep you updated on both cars, both Corollas heading forwards. Like I said, if you do want to stay up to date, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Thanks for watching, you legends. We'll see you next week.